Hi guys, it's Juan and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm coming at you with a recommendations video in which I will give you suggestions for books to read in winter. This time of year the days are shorter and darker, it is cold and nasty outside, so I don't know about you, but I love to stay indoors and settle down with a good book on my lap. If you are a mood reader like me, you are also probably a seasonal reader. I've loved putting together this list of my favorite books to read this time of year. To me, it makes sense to read books that are set at least in part in the season we're in because I find that it stimulates my imagination. When the atmosphere in a book matches the atmosphere that I am physically in, it is easier to connect with what I am reading. I find winter to be the perfect time of year to read because it tends to be cold and dreary outside, so I love to spend time indoors and immerse myself in a great book. I love reading, so what is not to love about a season when staying indoors reading is often the most attractive option to spend my free time. Anyway, let's get on with it and start with my recommendations for you. Not all the books I have for you today are set in winter, but many of them are, at least in part. I have selected novels that I think will appeal to most readers in terms of genre, time period, etc. Some of the books are cozy, but others will keep you breathless until you get to the last page. And the first book is one of my all-time favorite novels, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. This novel, first published in 1847, has become a classic, and it has many ingredients that make a great winter read. It is a coming-of-age story of one of the best female characters in the history of English literature, but it also has gothic and romance elements. Parts of it are scary and parts of it romantic. My favorite thing about Jane Eyre is Jane's voice. The whole novel is told in the first person, so Jane is telling you her own story. I love that because every time I read Jane Eyre, I feel such a strong kinship with the heroine. And I think that's what makes this novel feel so modern and relevant. Reading is an intimate act, probably the most intimate act that human beings can engage in without using their bodies. So the fact that Jane is talking to us directly makes you root for her through the many tribulations she goes through until the very end. So many tribulations. If you are a fan of romance novels, there's no way you can afford to miss out on reading Jane Eyre. But if you wouldn't touch romance novels with a barge pole, don't worry, because Jane Eyre could still be for you. There is nothing corny about the story, and in parts it is extremely dark and atmospheric, which makes it perfect for winter. Jane is an orphan who, upon coming of age, goes to work as a governess at Thornfield Hall in the north of England and falls in love with her boss, the mysterious Edward Rochester. Thornfield Hall is a gothic mansion where all kinds of creepy situations go down, but that is just the central part of the novel. Before Jane gets to Thornfield Hall, the novel begins with Jane as a child, and then after her time in Thornfield, You didn't think I was going to spoil Jane Eyre, did you? Okay, my second book recommendation is The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, which is an American novel from 1951. Actually, The Catcher in the Rye was first published in serial form between 45 and 46, so it is a post-World War II novel. Because the novel's protagonist is a 17-year-old teenager, some people think that The Catcher in the Rye is a YA novel. I don't know. That label didn't even exist when Salinger wrote this novel. I have read The Catcher in the Rye several times. The first time, I was a teenager, but I've also read it as an adult, and I must say it has always worked for me. This novel is also a coming-of-age story, but one that takes place in the space of just a few days. The novel has a winter setting because the action takes place between the end of the fall term and Christmas. During that time, 17-year-old Holden Caulfield travels from his boarding school in Pennsylvania to his family home in New York City. This novel has a very strong first-person narrator. Holden tells his own story, and we learn a lot about him and his family. Holden is a character who is in pain. He's alienated from everyone. Time and time again, he fails to make meaningful connections with people. Very few novels have depicted that feeling of loneliness and alienation that so many of us have at some point felt better than The Catcher in the Rye. Many people feel like that during their teenage years, and this novel captures that deftly. I won't lie to you, reading The Catcher in the Rye as an adult will give you a different perspective on teenage angst. I do find Holden more than a bit insufferable at times, but I also think that's why the novel is so good. Because yes, Holden is self-involved and a bit of a know-it-all, but who isn't like that when they are 17? If you want a novel about adult problems, how about a tale of adultery set in Imperial Russia? Who hasn't fantasized about having rich people's problems? I love reading stuff like that. If you're anything like me, you will also love Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. This novel is set in Russia, not always in winter, but there are plenty of wintry scenes. Anna Karenina was first published as a book in 1878. It is a long novel and it has many characters. Of course, most people have heard of the novel titular protagonist and her sad demise as an upper-class adulteress. And don't get me wrong, there is a lot about that in the novel, but there is also a whole lot more. Anna Karenina portrays a change in society. Tolstoy paints a vivid picture of a society torn between traditional and modern values. Russia at that time was largely still a rural society, but big cities such as St. Petersburg and inventions like the train accelerated a change in its values and morals. And I haven't read a novel that deals with those themes better than Anna Karenina. If you have some extra free time to read this winter, Anna Karenina might just be the perfect novel to read before the days become longer and brighter again and outdoor activities beckon. If you're enjoying my recommendations, please like this video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And don't forget that all the books I recommend in this video are linked to in the description box so you can buy them and support my channel. I am so excited about these recommendations and I haven't even told you what my favorite winter read is yet. But before we get to that, there are still a couple of other great books that I want to tell you about, and the next one is Emma by Jane Austen. I have chosen Emma because although it is not one of the most popular novels by Jane Austen, it has the perfect plot. And it is still a popular novel, just not as popular as Pride and Prejudice or Sense and Sensibility. Emma first came out in 1816 and it probably has the least likable protagonist Jane Austen ever wrote about. Emma Woodhouse is a wealthy young woman who loves to meddle in other people's love lives. She fancies herself as an expert and her intentions are always the best, but she gets everything so wrong. Let's face it, Emma is a bit of an idiot. One of those people who have a self-image who is so wrong and different from how other people see her. She thinks she knows people. She thinks that she knows what's best for them and how to achieve it. But the reader knows better. Well, not just the reader, also Emma's neighbor and close friend George Knightley knows Emma extremely well and is not afraid to call her out on her nonsense. Emma has an intricate plot that comes together beautifully at the end. It must be one of the best plotted novels I have ever read. It is light, romantic, but it will also make you laugh. So if you're looking for something light and fun to read with an appealing and evocative English Regency setting, Emma is for you. But if what you want is something that mixes thriller and erudition, how about a medieval detective story that will keep you on edge for hundreds of pages? I read The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco last summer, and as I read on, I remember wishing that I had saved it for winter. The Name of the Rose is a detective novel. Most of the novel is set in a monastery in the north of Italy, up in the mountains. All the main characters, including the two detectives investigating the murders, are monks. Reading that during a heat wave last summer was very strange. I think it makes more sense to read a novel like this in dreary weather. The Name of the Rose was first published in Italian in 1980. It was the first novel by the Italian professor of semiotics Umberto Eco. Eco was, among other things, a medievalist. He knew a lot about medieval Europe, and it shows in his debut novel. Some people complain that all that erudition slows down the pace of the novel. I am not a huge fan of murder mysteries, so my main focus when reading The Name of the Rose was not in solving the crime, and I think that is why I didn't mind all the intellectual digressions and discussions on theology. But don't get me wrong, The Name of the Rose is a murder mystery, and the murders will be solved at the end. No worries there for fans of the genre. It just happens to be a lot more than that, and a spectacular ride perfect for winter. Another novel that is perfect for winter is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. This is the kind of novel that most people have heard about, but not necessarily read. It is also the kind of novel that you might think you are totally familiar with before you read it, but when you read it, you realize that a lot of your ideas about it come from movies and TV, and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is not really what you expect. expected. For one thing, key parts of the novel take place in or near the North Pole in an icy landscape that will make your imagination run free. Frankenstein was first published in 1818, and it is genuinely a scary read. This is a tale of a scientist whose search for knowledge takes him to unimaginable places. The modern Prometheus, as Mary Shelley called him. Frankenstein tests the limits of scientific knowledge. As the Spanish painter Goya's famous painting The Dream of Reason produces monsters, in Frankenstein we get a reaction to the European Enlightenment and a deep critique of one of its main pillars. Frankenstein, like all literary masterpieces, works on many levels. Yes, the monster is terrifying, but what the monster tells us about ourselves and our thirst for knowledge and push for progress can also be terrifying. I think that Frankenstein will always be relevant to us, but don't just take my word for it. Okay, if you want a sad and beautiful love story at the end of the year, I have the perfect one for you. Ethan Frum by Edith Wharton is a gem of a novel that first came out in 1911. Picture a small town in New England. It is winter, of course, so there is snow everywhere. A farmer named Ethan is married to a woman named Zenobia, who is very sick. One day, Zenobia's cousin, a young, attractive, and healthy woman named Maddie, comes to the farm to help out the couple with domestic work. Ethan is immediately attracted to Maddie and feels a strong urge to cheat on his wife with her. The cozy winter setting and the tragic tone of this novel make Ethan Frum the perfect novel to read this time of year. And I'll admit that Ethan Frum is my favorite novel to read in winter. If you touch the screen now, you will be able to watch full reviews of the best two novels I have recommended in this video, Karenina and Ethan Frum. I hope you enjoy them. Bye!